The world's a hot mess. But you know what? It's also kind of amazing. We recently figured out that plants are screaming, coffee is saving naps, and somewhere in the middle of it all, goats are chasing college degrees. I'm Mike with List25, and here are 150 facts. Between 1885 and 1903, the world basically rewrote the rules of what was possible. In 1885, Carl Benz built the Benz Patent Motor Wagon, the first real car powered by an internal combustion engine. It was clunky, but it worked. Then, 9 years later, Guglielmo Marconi got the first wireless telegraph system up and running, and suddenly people could talk over unimaginable distances without a single wire. And then, just 9 years after that, the Wright brothers pulled off their first flight in North Carolina. So yeah, in less than 20 years, we went from horse-drawn buggies to sending messages across the oceans to actual flying. It sounds like a bad idea, right? To drink coffee and then immediately try to fall asleep? But according to new research, that's exactly how you supercharge a nap. It's called a coffee nap. How fitting. And the idea is simple. Drink a coffee quickly, about a 12-ounce cup, and then lie down immediately for a 15 to 20-minute nap. Napping clears the chemical in your brain called adenosine, which normally makes you feel sleepy. Once that clears out, the caffeine can kick in like it should and latch onto your brain's receptors, making you more alert when you wake up. And that's where the magic happens. Studies have found that coffee naps can boost performance, focus, and mood better than just coffee or a nap alone. So if you're ever a tired driver or night shift worker, this hack is basically made for you. Scientists recently set up microphones just a few inches away from tomato and tobacco plants and caught something no one really expected. When plants were dehydrated or damaged, they let out tiny ultrasonic popping sounds, kind of like someone stomping all over a sheet of bubble wrap. The healthy plants barely made a noise, but the stressed plants went crazy, popping up to 40 times an hour. And then, because science never sleeps, the team trained AI to recognize the kinds of stress a plant was under just by listening to its screams. And it got it right about 80% of the time. The vegan meal situation just got a lot more complicated if you ask me. Most people have heard of the Oxford and Cambridge boat race. It's one of Britain's biggest sporting traditions and has been around since 1829 when the two universities first went head-to-head on the Thames while thousands of people watched from the riverbanks. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's a much smaller, and honestly way funnier, version of the same rivalry. The Oxford and Cambridge goat race. Every year, two goats, dressed up in the blue colors of their universities, race each other at Spitalfields City Farm. And since goats aren't exactly known to be the most cooperative animals on earth, someone lures them along the track with a bucket of food. Whichever goat wins earns the bragging rights for their university, until it's time to race again the next year. According to a 2025 study, whale pee, and everything else whales leave behind, is packed with nutrients that tropical marine life needs to survive. During the summer months, whales feed up north, where the water is already rich in nutrients. But when breeding season comes around, they migrate to the tropics, where the ocean is a lot more barren. That's when they end up doing the local ecosystem a massive favor, releasing nutrients through their urine, carcasses, and even their placentas. Researchers estimate that whales deposit nearly 3,800 tons of nitrogen every year. And it's not an over-exaggeration to say that without them, tropical marine life would be seriously struggling. Before commercial whaling wiped out so many of them, scientists believe the oceans used to be even greener thanks to all that extra whale fertilizer. The word naughty wasn't always about mischief and mayhem. A long time ago, it actually referred to something far less playful. Poverty. Yep, naughty originally described people who had naught to their name. Over time, it took on a harsher meaning, implying that these people also lacked morals. By the 1600s, though, it shifted again, losing the poverty connection and becoming all about behavior. That's when it turned to the word we know today, a way to call out kids, and sometimes adults, for bad behavior. In times of war, there are very few rules that are followed. However, during the 1916 Irish War of Independence, both the Irish revolutionaries and British occupiers agreed on one thing: to stop fighting for a man named James Kearney. It wasn't so much for the man himself, but more so what he was doing that united the two opposing forces. Kearney was a park keeper who took care of animals, especially ducks, in an area called St. Stephen's Green. And even at the height of the violence, every day without fail, the Irish and British soldiers would stop fighting to allow just enough time for Kearney to feed the ducks. who knew that ducks were the answer to peace? If you crave a caffeine fix in the morning, then I have some shocking news for you. Caffeine withdrawal is actually a mental disorder. Because of its addictive drug-like qualities, coffee can affect your mood and concentration. Miss out on that morning Joe, and you might experience tiredness and headaches. You might even get flu-like symptoms. That's why the American Psychiatric Association classifies withdrawal as a disorder. And if you also like coffee, shameless self-plug here, but we do have a second channel now called Dark Roast Detectives, where we deep dive into true crime stories, so check that out. You know the old saying, those who can't do, teach? Well, not true in this case. Mara Mandelbaum, aka the Queen of Fences, was a highly successful criminal in 19th century New York. She was actually a crime boss, at a time when female crime bosses weren't thought to be a thing. Fences is the underworld slang for people dealing in stolen goods. The Queen decided to open up a school for young people with no other option in life. They received a world-class education in wrongdoing. Mandelbaum wound up in Canada when everything went south, no doubt leaving a legacy of crime in the shape of former students. These days, billionaires are remembered by the empires they build, and buildings named after them. But back in Roman times, for the wealthiest of all, that simply wasn't poetic enough. Super rich citizens like Marcus Licinius Crassus had their bodies treated uniquely, when they were loved and when they were hated. Marcus's net worth has been estimated at the equivalent of around $20 billion in today's money, and he had a huge influence on the trajectory of the Roman Empire. Apparently, after he tried to expand his power by going to battle with the Parthian Empire and lost, he was executed with gold. And no, I'm not talking about being buried with jewelry. He had molten gold poured down his throat as a representation of his greed. I guess at least he went down with a very valuable body. Even ants need to take a break every now and then, and while they don't exactly take naps like us humans, research shows that they do have a very unique resting pattern. Studies by James and Cautel in 1983 found that ants take short cyclical micro breaks during the day. These quick rests last about 8 minutes in a 12-hour period and are observed by the entire nest as a group, which means that every colony of ants in the world likes to take a synchronized power nap every few hours. Since it's almost that time of year when everyone's hoping to stay on the nice list, actually we've passed that. Happy holidays, everyone. It's funny to think that nice didn't always mean what it does today. Back in the 13 and 1400s, it was actually an insult. Calling someone nice was basically saying they were ignorant. Over time, though, people began to use it to describe luxury and fancy high society types who were overly focused on being polite. Eventually, it softened into the word we use today for anything pleasant. Nice. And a region in France, but not pronounced that way. Poor Abraham Lincoln, he just couldn't find peace even after he was assassinated. A band of Chicago criminals conspired together to steal his body. Why? They believed they could demand a $200,000 ransom to get one of their gang members released from prison, but they never made it that far. Their extreme inexperience meant that they were barely able to break into the Oak Ridge Cemetery where Lincoln was being kept. Even worse, a man they recruited to help was actually an informant of the Secret Service. Needless to say, the gang failed and was arrested just a couple of days after their attempt. The plot led to Lincoln's body being underneath a newly built tomb that now serves as a memorial, and I hear the security is actually much better. If there's one place you don't want to let one go, it's in the air. With everyone cooped up in an airlock container, there's nowhere for that fart to go. So what do? Well, in the case of one lady on a flight to Dallas in 2006, she decided to, light some matches. Shockingly, this plan didn't work. When people smelled the matches, they thought the plane could have been on fire. So the farter caused an emergency landing. Should just blame the person next to her. In the early 20th century, authorities in Naples, Italy commissioned a ship like no other. The kindergarten ship had a young crew. Very young, in fact. The aim behind the project was to get kids off the streets and into a disciplined environment where they could learn new skills. The name of the boat was the Caracciola. Teacher Giulia Civita Franceschi was the captain aboard this amazing vessel. The voyage lasted 15 years before finally ending. Hundreds of years ago, there were several different systems developing all around the world. One of the most interesting was the one used by the Aztecs, who lived in Central America between the 14th and 16th centuries. In one of the best surviving paintings explaining the system, known as the Codex Vergara, there are equations for geometry, division, and multiplication. Instead of numbers, the Aztecs used a dot for the number 1, a bar for the number 5, and a collection of different symbols for 20. Modern researchers analyzing the system have worked out that the Aztecs were likely using algorithms to determine the size of pieces of land. Depending on where you are in the world, you might be using Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius when talking about the weather. Now, before we start arguing about which measurement makes the most sense, let me ask you this. Did you know there's a temperature where they perfectly agree? Believe it or not, there is. At a freezing negative 40 degrees, both Celsius and Fahrenheit read the same. Yep, negative 40 Celsius is also negative 40 Fahrenheit. Not that it matters much, because at that temperature, let's be honest, it's freaking cold no matter how you measure it. We all know toast lands butter side down. But why? Maybe it's karma, bad luck, or just the universe keeping us humble. Luckily, physicist Robert Matthews figured out the science behind it, and no, the butter being heavier is not a culprit. It's actually all about physics. When toast falls from a standard table height, which actually kind of down here, you can see my hands better here, it rotates at a steady speed due to gravity and its center of mass. The issue? It doesn't have enough time to complete a full flip, so the butter side ends up on the floor. Matthews actually went on to win a Nobel Prize in 1996 for all his troubles. In the pile of tragedies of World War II, many heroic acts have been all but forgotten. However, one American soldier's act stands out more than others. His name was Lieutenant John R. Fox, and he was fighting as a part of the African-American 92nd Infantry Division against German forces. On Christmas Day, 1944, he was in the village of Somacolonia in Italy as it was taken over by Germans, who slowly encircled his position. By the following morning, Fox was boxed in with virtually no escape. Despite his fellow soldiers hesitating, Fox ordered artillery shots to be fired at his own location to take out 100 German soldiers. His final words were, "Give 'em hell." Now that's badass. Squirrels can be a nuisance, but are they really capable of espionage? That's what they thought over in Iran in 2007 when 14 furry little creatures were taken into custody. It's alleged that they were wearing tiny surveillance tech, making them a threat not just to people's nut supplies, but also their national security. It sounds unbelievable. The shocking truth is that governments have used animals in this way before. For example, the CIA was training pigeons to take photos during the Cold War. Yeah, seriously. Polly definitely wanted a cracker in this unique educational establishment. Opened in Philadelphia in 1903, the idea behind the academy was simple and completely bizarre. Recordings of human voices would be played to parrots. These feathery students would then learn how to speak. It was quicker than having them stuck in a cage at home mimicking random people, I guess. The reason the academy got started appears to be strictly financial. Founder Mrs. Hope had a husband who sold birds. He wanted to maximize his profit with talking parrots, and so a legend was born. What's the real price of war? For Europe, up until the beginning of the 20th century, tensions had bubbled up and manifested in military campaigns, but nothing compared to what happened during World War I. Estimates of the number of deaths reached up to 40 million people. It defined the future of many nation-states, with 4 empires being ripped apart. By the end of the 4 years of bloodshed, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire had all fallen. From there, modern states emerged, but old rivalries would lead to another, even more devastating world war just over 20 years later. Lesson not learned, I guess. Forget about a quarter pounder with cheese. In the Philippines, McDonald's serves up a surprising comfort food: spaghetti. And no, I'm not kidding. Mixed spaghetti, a Filipino twist on the classic Italian dish, is a permanent fixture on McDonald's menus across the country. You may or may not remember, but mixed spaghetti used to be a nationwide sensation here in the US too. Unfortunately, stateside, it eventually fell victim to menu changes, and we now have to make do with our burgers, nuggets, and fries. International McDonald's get all the cool stuff. Meanwhile, we here in the US get the boring stuff, and I don't get it. McDonald's started here. I want the cool stuff too. If you visit the New Bedford Whaling Museum in Massachusetts, watch your step. One of their star exhibits, a 66-foot blue whale skeleton named Kobo, king of the blue ocean, is still dripping oil 26 years after its death. The museum even had to install a special funnel system to catch the oil before it hits the floor. Kobo's story began in 1998 when it was struck by a tanker propeller. After scientists stripped away the flesh and cleaned the bones, oil from its bone marrow still remained. Whale oil helps these giants stay buoyant and acts as an energy reserve. so it's no surprise that it's still oozing. In fact, Kobo has leaked over a liter so far and is expected to keep dripping until 2060. Houdini may have been the greatest human escape artist, but what about other animals? One small beetle called the Regimbardia attenuata might give him a run for his money. It's often found near the water, putting it at risk of frogs, who are always hungry for small bugs, but it has a trick up its sleeve once it's been swallowed. For almost 2 hours, the frog doesn't suspect a thing. Then, in a Houdini-esque feat, the beetle somehow finds its way out of one of the frog's vents at the rear. In other words, its butt. I'll spoil the trick for you. Inside the frog's body, the beetle races through the inner organs before the strong digestive chemicals have time to liquefy it. Then it uses its legs to tickle the frog's sphincter and make it want to poop. It's a little messy, but the beetle walks away free. Just like magic. I don't recommend it. Judas was the disciple who famously betrayed Jesus, so it's a great role for an actor to play on stage. Unfortunately, Judas also appears to bring bad luck. Not just bad luck, but death. Can you believe that 2 actors have lost their lives during performances while portraying the biblical betrayer? These deaths took place in 2000 in Italy and 2012 in Brazil. How did they die? Well, Judas hung himself, and the play dramatizes this event, which went tragically wrong in both cases. You may know about the Haitian slave revolt of 1791. If you do, you probably didn't learn it in school. Some commentators have called out the education system for not doing more to highlight the story. So, what happened in this revolution? Saint-Domingue was a French colony whose population was mainly slaves from Africa. Toussaint Louverture, a freed slave turned general who himself profited from the trade, was one of the leading figures of the uprising. It was partly inspired by the French Revolution and a burning sense of injustice. The revolution is described as the first ever slave revolt and the only successful one. Saint-Domingue became Haiti, plus an independent nation in 1804. Speaking of war, it was in World War I that many military innovations first appeared. One of those was the tank. It may now be a common sight in images from conflict zones, but back in 1916 it was unheard of. It was the British who first unleashed it on their enemies, a gigantic vehicle called the Mark I, and it came in both male and female versions. The male tanks were loaded with huge 6-pound guns, while the female ones had machine guns and an escape valve. Unfortunately, the armor of the Mark I was relatively weak, with strong bullets and heavy infantry breaking through the outer shell. Still, the sight of a 28-ton death machine rolling towards you would have been terrifying to enemy soldiers. We've all been there, mindlessly going for the snacks even when our stomachs are full. But did you know there is a specific term for this in Japanese culture? Kuchisabishi literally translates to lonely mouth, or a longing to have something in the mouth, and perfectly describes the phenomenon of subconscious eating, where we snack because of boredom, stress, habit, or simply because our mouths are looking for a bit of stimulation. Scientists are using CRISPR, a gene editing tool, to find better ways to manage rat infestations without harming the species as a whole. Their goal is to tweak the genes of rats in problem areas so that they have mainly male offspring, gradually reducing their numbers. Another approach involves using RNA technology to target the traits that make rats so good at spreading. CRISPR has already been used to treat genetic disorders in mice and human embryos. Now, experts hope it can help control rat populations in a way that's effective and doesn't disrupt ecosystems. How many people signed your last birthday card? Maybe a handful if you're lucky? Well, imagine getting one with 5.5 million signatures. That's how many Polish people signed a birthday card in 1926 to mark the USA's 150th anniversary. At the time, that would have been about 1/6 of Poland's entire population. You see, Poland has a special relationship with the US, not only because of the huge number of immigrants traveling there, but also how the US supported Poland's independence in 1918. The card is known as the emblem of goodwill, and it's definitely a kind gesture. Would you go to a restaurant where everything was a toilet? And no, I'm not talking about the standard of hygiene. I mean a place where you sit on a toilet and ate from a miniature toilet, where it wouldn't be unusual to see someone eating ice cream from a bath. Welcome to the modern toilet restaurant in Taipei, which isn't just a single restaurant, it's actually a chain. What connection? You see, they really don't teach this stuff in school. The Civil War in America between 1861 and 65 changed the game for worldwide cotton supplies. With a major cotton operation in the South out of action due to the blockades, Egypt was in a perfect position to send cotton to the UK and other places in Europe who needed the material fast. In war, there are no limits to propaganda, and sometimes even after the dust is settled. When the fighting of World War I was done and dusted, the following year there was still a lot of resentment towards Germany in the US. That's why Indiana put in place a law that banned German from being spoken in public, at homes, or even in schools. It was viewed as a language of the enemy, despite many early German immigrants to the US having completely integrated by that time. We all know Lady Liberty as a symbol of freedom, hope, and opportunity. But did you know she once had another equally impressive role? For 16 years, between 1886 and 1902, the Statue of Liberty served as a functioning lighthouse. Her iconic torch, a beacon of hope for the countless immigrants, was also intended to guide ships safely into New York Harbor. Unfortunately, technology limitations at the time proved to be a challenge. Despite the initial excitement, the lighthouse's effectiveness was restricted by its cost and limited range. And as a result, Lady Liberty's role as a lighthouse ultimately came to an end. Hashtag bring back the lighthouse, that sounds cool. During the Cold War, the Soviets secretly developed a weapon that could be fired in space, the R-23M Kartek cannon. Designed by Aaron Richter, this beast of a gun could fire 200-gram shells at 690 meters per second with thousands of shots per minute. After its construction, the cannon was installed on the Almaz space station, where it was even test-fired, firing 20 shells in the atmosphere while using jet thrusters to counter the recoil. The results? Well, actually, those are still classified. But when the Soviets updated Almaz, they swapped out the cannon for interceptor missiles. So I guess they wanted an even bigger bang. You ever just kept your eyes closed to avoid something? Well, so did one of the most powerful leaders in history. Louis XIV, better known as the Sun King because he thought he was at the center of the universe, made many enemies during his reign. More than any political opponent, his greatest enemy was the people. In 1648, the people of Paris were so fed up with the Sun King's increasing power that they rioted. Mind you, Louis was only 12 at the time, but had already been king for around 8 years. The rioters were able to break into the royal palace and demanded to be taken to Louis's room. Rather than talking with the group of concerned citizens, the king apparently pretended to be asleep, and the group eventually left. Come to think of it, that actually sounds a lot like something a 12-year-old would do. You think you've got a big family? In India, a gentleman named Zion Achana had no less than 39 wives, 94 kids, and 33 grandkids. Plus, they all lived in the same house. It must have been someplace. Mind you, this was no ordinary fam. Zion Achana, who passed away in 2021, led the Chana Paul Christian religious sect. This sect is big on polygamy, meaning that when he started a family, it naturally went large. The Italian explorer Christopher Columbus is thought to have discovered what became America back in 1492. They've made movies about it, which is appropriate, because the story's a work of fiction. Columbus certainly went there, but he wasn't the only person who knew about the territory. Historical evidence suggests that the Vikings landed in the so-called New Worlds hundreds of years earlier. Vikings in the Americas? Well, that's a movie I'd love to see. I never did finish Vikings. I think I got like 2 seasons in. You ever wonder why people always look so sad and serious in old photographs? Especially those taken in the early days of photography in the late 19th century? I mean, rarely is there a shot of a family smiling together. Usually they have a gloomy demeanor, like posing for a photo is tough work. So, why so serious? One main reason is culture. People were still used to seeing images in paintings, whereas people rarely smiled in portraits. Why? Apparently cracking a smile might suggest some kind of mental illness, or at the very least, a lack of class. Eventually, people started to loosen up and relax more in photos. Look at this photograph! Every time I do it, no one laughs. Have you ever wondered how long it would take to fall to the center of the Earth? Assuming, of course, we could drill a hole that far, which is currently impossible. Well, the brilliant minds of science have done some calculations and come up with a surprising number. 38 minutes, 11 seconds. That might seem crazy, considering Earth's true diameter of plus or minus 7,918 miles, 12,742 kilometers, but scientists factored in Earth's gravity and how it changes as you get closer to the core. Interestingly, earlier calculations based on a uniform Earth density led to a longer estimate of 42 minutes. And now you know. And knowing is half the battle. And the other half is violence. In the early 1500s, King Manuel of Portugal became the proud owner of Europe's first rhinoceros in over 1,000 years. The incredible gift caused a frenzy, inspiring everything from public spectacles to wildly inaccurate art featuring rivets, scales, and a random horn on the rhino's back. But King Manuel had bigger plans. He was curious about the ancient claims that rhinos and elephants were mortal enemies, so he staged a fight between his new rhino and a captive elephant. The result? A complete flop. Both refused to engage. Embarrassed, Manuel gifted the rhino to the Pope. Sadly, the rhino drowned when the ship in which it was being transported sank, and it never made it to Rome. You didn't want to be hanging Christmas decorations during 17th century in New England. Otherwise, you'd get a knock on the door from Puritan authorities. Decorations were seen as pro-Catholic, the Puritans being hardline Protestants and also pagan in nature. Christmas as a whole fell under this category, so you couldn't do so much as sing a carol. The penalty for keeping Christmas law was passed in 1659. You were fined the equivalent of $48 for breaking it. We all know American Independence Day as July 4th, but if one of the founding fathers, John Adams, had his way, the holiday wouldn't be celebrated on the day the Declaration of Independence was signed. According to Adams, it should have been moved 2 days earlier to July 2nd. That's because the 2nd was the day that the Continental Congress first voted to declare the US a separate state from Great Britain. Centuries later, John Adams' argument is finally being adopted, with the city of Philadelphia celebrating July 2nd as a pre-Independence Day. In 2021, a Cypriot bride, Maria Paraskeva, stole the show when she showed up at her wedding with the longest wedding veil ever recorded. To give you an idea of the effort expanded, it took 30 volunteers and 6 hours to get the bride dressed and to the altar. The veil itself flowed an incredible 6,962.6 meters, or 22,843 feet behind her. The impressive feat even caught the attention of Guinness World Records, who shared a video of it on their Instagram, which I'm sure we're showing right now as I speak. Glowworms and slugs were some of the most unexpected contributors to World War I. Glowworms, kept in jars, provided light in the trenches, making it easier for soldiers to read letters, maps, and reports. Slugs, however, had an even stranger role: detecting mustard gas. After testing various animals, the US Army discovered that slugs could sense incredibly tiny amounts of the gas, just one particle in 10 to 12 million, long before it became harmful to humans. So whenever the slugs showed discomfort, soldiers knew it was time to put on the gas masks. Just in case you needed another reason to love horses, did you know they have something called fairy fingers? Technically, these are called eponychium, and they're smooth layers of tissue around their hooves after they're born. These are designed so that the baby's horse kicking in the womb doesn't injure the mother. The fairy feet then fall off when the foal is out in the world and standing up on its own, which is usually within just an hour and a half of birth. And it takes us humans a year to walk? God, we're really slow. How did we ever survive? Here's a tip. If you're in Sudan and you see a teddy bear, whatever you do, don't name them Muhammad. Teacher Gillian Gibbons from Britain made that mistake in 2007. When her class revealed that they were looking after Muhammad the bear, it led to Gibbons doing jail time. Unfortunately, her actions caused offense to Islam, meaning she was sentenced to 15 days behind bars. After a backlash, not to mention hardliners pushing for a tougher sentence, she was pardoned and released. We all know about Laika, the poor stray dog who was blasted into space by the Russians in 1957, right? 6 years later, the French chose a cat named Félicette to boldly go where no feline had gone before. She was what's known as a tuxedo cat, as in she had a two-tone coat. Despite reportedly having a relaxed quality about her, as most cats do, there's no way of knowing exactly how Félicette felt being shot into the atmosphere in a rocket. She went up 97 miles and traveled among the stars for 13 minutes. She would have floated in microgravity. Cat lovers, cover your ears for this next part. Félicette made it home safely, but was then deliberately killed so authorities could study her. Given the importance of Independence Day, sharing the date as your birthday must be an auspicious trait. But there's only one US president who has had the honor of being born on July 4th, and that is Calvin Coolidge. He led the country between 1923 on their Instagram, which I'm sure we're showing right now as I speak. 18. America's favorite pie is not American at all. There is no doubt that apple pie is one of the most well-known and quintessential symbols of Americana. But here's the surprising fact. Apple pie, as we know and love it, doesn't come from the good old US of A. Its origins actually lie across the pond in England, where it developed under the influence of culinary traditions from France, the Netherlands, and even the Ottoman Empire. In fact, apple trees themselves couldn't even be found in America until European settlers brought them along. Extra fun fact, I don't like apple pie, so All those people calling me not American, ha, it's not even American. I don't like it. I don't want hot, mushy apple. I'm sorry. It's a texture thing for me. The oldest known water was discovered in 2011, and it, well, wasn't here on Earth. The ancient vapor cloud, located 12 billion light years away, is also the largest mass of water ever detected, 140 trillion times the volume of all Earth's oceans combined. And if you aren't impressed yet, you should also know that the cloud surrounds a supermassive black hole with the ever so graceful name APM 08279 plus 5255, which radiates more energy than a quadrillion suns. Must be Elon Musk's kid. Ravens are among some of the smartest animals we know of. By the age of just 4 months, they have cognitive skills similar to great apes and the problem-solving capacities of a 7-year-old child. Ravens are forward-thinking, meticulous, and know how to use tools. But sometimes, even their tools aren't enough firepower. When ravens struggle to open an animal carcass, they've been observed calling other predators on the scene. Once the animal is broken open, they can finally have their meal. Sometimes intelligence is just knowing who to call. 2009 saw a goat undergo a citizen's arrest by concerned locals in Nigeria. Why? Because of the shocking identity of this lovable creature. You see, they believed the goat was in fact a robber who had transformed themselves using black magic. One way to avoid the police, I guess. Seriously though, the idea of a shapeshifter has been part of Nigerian culture for centuries. And real quick guys, if you're enjoying this video and you want to help us out, please give it a like and comment. It really helps the channel because it helps the algorithm, so thanks. Over in the Nordic parts of the world, you can walk wherever you like in the countryside and generally enjoy the wonder of nature. It's a basic human right to have the freedom to roam, which translated from the word Allemansrechten. Obviously, you can't roam into someone's garden or be disruptive, but if it's a wild piece of land, you don't have to get their owner's permission to be there. And real quick, guys, if you like this video and you want to help me out, please give it a like and a comment. It helps the algorithm and helps our channel a lot. So, thanks. Imagine being held hostage and having no way of communicating with the outside world. There's nothing going out and nothing coming in. How would you know what to do or what to think? For Colombian soldiers under the control of guerrilla forces in 2010, the country had a genius idea to smuggle a message in. It wouldn't be through paper or by word of mouth, but through music. Military tacticians wrote a pop song and embedded a secret Morse code sequence in it, hoping the soldiers would hear it. From captivity, the soldiers did hear the radio being played, and they were able to decipher the message in the chorus, which simply said, 19 people rescued. You're next. Don't lose hope. The soldiers were released after negotiations with some confirming that the song was heard and did give them hope. The power of music. 2 of the world's biggest cut diamonds can be found residing inside the British Crown Jewels. And I'm talking giants here. The Cullinan 1, also known as the Great Star of Africa, weighs an astonishing 530.2 carats and takes center stage in the scepter with the cross. Not to be outdone, the Cullinan 2, or the Second Star of Africa, weighs 317.4 carats and holds the prime position front and center on the imperial state crown. These jewels are one of a kind and truly fit for a king. Flatworms may look like scraps of colorful silk while they're drifting in tropical oceans, but don't let their beauty fool you. They're total weirdos. Like many creatures, they're hermaphrodites, having both male and female sex organs. When it's time to mate, 2 flatworms rise up and duel with their pointy penises, each trying to inseminate the other. The loser, if you can call it that, gets stuck carrying the eggs. Scientists have even given this bizarre battle the perfect name: penis fencing. Yep, that's a real thing. For most of us, the fewer dead bodies we see, the better. The thought of them being sliced open in hospitals is best left to professionals. However, here's something you might not know about those professionals. Medical students are often hit by a massive food craving right after dealing with cadavers. So, what the hell's going on here? Well, it relates to a chemical called formaldehyde, which is used in the preservation of bodies. A secondary effect is that it can stimulate hunger, a phenomenon known as formaldehyde hunger, aptly named. It might be a good strategy to actually set up a McDonald's outside medical labs. Artist Jorge Maki wanted to push the boundaries of his craft, so he created a piece titled The Invisible Art. It sold in New York for an impressive $10,000 in 2011. Art is a subjective business. Just as well because this artwork technically doesn't exist. There's a frame, for sure, but there's nothing inside it. You see it using your imagination. The money, however, is very much real. Be careful not to drink too much. Earl Grey tea? If you're enjoying this beverage with the swanky reputation by the gallon, you might be endangering your health. How so? Well, Earl Grey contains bergamot essence, bergamot being an Italian citrus fruit. It's zesty and refreshing, but it can lead to you becoming intoxicated. You might feel muscle cramps and experience blurred vision, plus nausea and diarrhea. Hearing that a pilot has no legs is never reassuring. That is, unless that pilot's name happens to be Douglas Bader. A British pilot who began his career in stunts, one day Douglas had a near-death experience, rolling his biplane too close to the ground, where the plane's wing clipped the ground and he was pulled down with it. For any normal pilot, the crash would have been career-ending. Douglas was forced to have both legs amputated, leaving him with metal-made prosthetic limbs. Once World War II arrived in 1939, though, Douglas was determined to help his country defeat the Nazis. And the British couldn't afford to leave out a talented pilot, even if it was one without legs. By the end of the war, Douglas shot down 22 planes himself and now lives on as one of the most legendary British pilots of all time. Did you know the glitzy world of the Oscars once gave out awards to kids? The Academy Juvenile Award, or the Juvenile Oscar as it was nicknamed, recognized outstanding performances by young stars under 18. Unlike the regular categories, this special award was an honor bestowed by the Academy at their discretion. The award eventually faded away in the 1960s as the Oscars shifted its focus towards recognizing excellence across all acting categories, with age being less of a factor. And talented young actors like Patty Duke and Tatum O'Neal would go on to win competitive Oscars without a dedicated juvenile category. Taxonomic names can be a mouthful. Take the lion, officially known as Panthera leo. It sounds flowery, right? But a team of German scientists kept it refreshingly simple when naming the genus of tiny frogs found in Madagascar. They called it Minnie. And yes, these frogs live up to the name. Each species comes with an equally adorable title: Minnie Mum, Minnie Ature, and Minnie Skule. They're so small they can fit on your fingernail with plenty of space left over. That's adorable. Back in 1870, history was made when Joseph Rainey, Robert DeLarge, and Robert Elliott were elected to the House of Representatives to represent South Carolina. What was so special about them? These men were African Americans, the first to ever become congressmen. That was just 5 years after the Civil War. Unfortunately, it didn't last. Rainey and his fellow black congressmen were driven out of the office by violence before the end of the decade. It's nice to see the US has come a long way in the last 150 years. The death of 16-year-old Yi Meng-wan in 2013 was shocking, unbelievable, and heartbreaking. She was rescued after the Asiana Airlines plane she traveled on had to crash land in San Francisco. However, it's believed she was obscured from view by a firefighter's phone whilst lying on the runway. 2 fire truck drivers reportedly didn't see her and ran into her twice. While there were some fatalities from the crash itself, this death was made especially tragic due to the circumstances. Authorities reached a settlement with her parents in 2015. Lead is a material we use for all kinds of things, even though it's poisonous. High quantities of it are bad news, with smaller quantities described as hazardous in a report from 1979. How long have we known about the dangers of lead? Longer than you think. The ancient Romans warned against lead despite it being used in wine production. Go back to 2000 BCE, and connections were made between illness and regular household items such as cooking pots. Usually, it's more important how you see yourself than how others do. But when it comes to international politics, it gets a little more tricky. North Korea, which is relatively isolated from the global community, doesn't think of itself as North Korea. After the Korean War ended in 1953, it's actually still technically ongoing. The north and south of the peninsula were split in half and went in radically different directions. That's an understatement. While the South increased ties with America and created a democratic government, the North turned to an oppressive communist regime. To this day, people inside North Korea simply consider themselves Koreans. And if they had their way, it would be Kim Jong-un in charge of a united Korea. For now, that looks pretty unlikely, to say the least. The Adventures of Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un. Fantastic video series if you haven't seen it on YouTube. You have to like stupid humor. If you're a poker enthusiast, you know a royal flush is the ultimate hand. But how often do you actually see one dealt? Well, the odds are about as rare as finding a 4-leaf clover. There are only 4 ways to form a royal flush, 1 per suit. And with a standard 52-card deck, you're looking at a minuscule probability of 0.000154%, or roughly 1 in 649,740. In simpler terms, the odds are stacked against you. But hey, that just makes getting one all that sweeter, right? Dolphins might have more in common with humans than we thought. They sleep talk. But their version is like an English speaker sleep talking in French. They seem to be doing it in a whale. According to Live Science, researchers observed dolphins in aquariums making whale-like sounds late at night, even though they'd only ever heard those noises as recordings during daytime shows. Their behavior suggests that dolphins may replay their daily experiences in their head, including the pre-recorded whale sounds. That's my whale sound impersonation. I am not a dolphin. In World War II, each country brought their best weapons. England, known for their naval superiority, brought their boats. Meanwhile, Japan brought their feared kamikaze attack planes, where suicide bombers would fly directly into targets with explosives attached. English boats and Japanese planes came head-to-head, especially in the Pacific, where one kamikaze plane left an unmistakable imprint on the HMS Sussex. Thankfully for the sailors, the plane didn't manage to break through the ship's walls, but the mark it left looked so detailed it could be a painting. Incredibly, you can be sent to prison in Jamaica if you're a man who wants to sleep with another man. And it's not a light sentence either. You could spend up to a decade in jail if you're caught breaking this particular law, called the Buggery Law. This long-standing rule was repealed in other places, but not here. Even more surprisingly, acts of intimacy between men are seen as the big problem, with women apparently free from jail. That said, they experience a lot of hostility and prejudice. Jamaica is no ally to the LGBTQ+ community. Would you take medicine if it was made from people? Believe it or not, cannibal-type attitudes were adopted in 16th and 17th century healthcare. Blood, bones, body fat. It wasn't unusual for these to become ingredients recommended by doctors. For example, there are cases where people with skin conditions were given human fat as part of their treatment. No thanks. I'm good. Scientists have known about the dangers of smoking for more than 100 years, but it took a long time to begin public health campaigns to inform the public. And shockingly, the first nationwide anti-smoking campaign was rolled out in Germany in 1940 by the Nazis. They were big supporters of reducing smoking, and so restricted where people could smoke, how much soldiers received, and how much tax tobacco companies had to pay. Hitler believed that it was a poison given to white people by Native Americans as revenge for introducing them to alcohol. Have you ever thought about ditching your textbooks and majoring in wine? Well, Cornell University offers a fancy Bachelor of Science degree in viticulture and enology. Basically, it teaches students all about the science and business behind growing these delicious grapes and turning them into amazing wines. While Cornell's program is perfect for cool climates like New York, they don't discriminate against warmer grapes and do cover winemaking techniques from all around the world. So whether you want to own a vineyard in Napa or become a wine whiz in Cape Town, the world is your oyster. Or grape. The world is your grape. That makes more. Don't make oyster wine. That sounds awful. And I like oysters. These days, locks of hair are usually saved by sentimental moms as keepsakes of their babies. But in the 18th century, gifting hair was a respectable and surprisingly common gesture. In 2018, an archivist at Union College found an old almanac from 1793 belonging to Philip Schuyler. Inside was an envelope labeled Washington's hair, containing a few yellow-gray strands. Experts confirmed it came from Washington himself. The hair probably passed from Washington to his close friends Alexander and Eliza Hamilton, then to the Schuyler family, who later donated it with the book. Speaking of war, soldiers need all the help they can get. During World War I, when the brutal and sluggish trench war reigned supreme, staying quiet and undetected was essential. That meant using conventional sources of light, like lanterns, was out of the question. So instead, many soldiers found a natural solution. They would light up their maps with small glowworms. These weren't suspicious. They were abundant and worked perfectly as tiny torches. Mistrust in the Muslim community proved to be misplaced in 2006. The FBI assigned an inside man to the Dar al-Hekma Mosque in Southern California. His job was to pose as an extremist and secretly film and record what people were saying. Did he uncover any plots? Nope. He was, however, reported by his own bosses by suspicious Muslims. While this is quite an amusing story, the FBI's questionable actions did upset individuals in the community. The Bureau had to go to court over the matter a few years later. You won't look at dolphins the same way again after this story. The late 50s saw a weird experiment take place, funded by the American government. They wanted to explore the idea of dolphins talking like humans. Why? Because neuroscientist Dr. John Lilly had some groundbreaking ideas about what dolphins were capable of. However, when researcher Margaret Howe Lovat joined the team, she had to live a pretty dolphin-focused lifestyle. And by focused, I mean really focused. For some reason, things got a little sexual, and reportedly dolphin handjobs were involved. Yeah, you heard me right. I should probably end the commentary at this point. Or, as the French say, fin. As if science wasn't dystopian enough, now we're apparently able to give fake memories to mice. How did they do it? After genetic engineering, they were able to trigger memories of a mouse being electrically shocked by stimulating its light cells with a laser. Eventually, the researchers were able to get a new mouse with the same genetically engineered cells to respond in the same way to the same laser. The only difference was, it had never even been shocked. These were false memories implanted through genetic engineering. It gives us a whole new insight into how memory works in the brain. But hopefully it doesn't lead to us all being implanted with fake histories too. I think night gardens are truly spectacular. I don't know if you've ever looked into this, but there are tons of amazing flowers that wait until the sun sets to show off. From the Cereus cactus, which comes alive for a single night, to the evening primrose that fills the air with its sweet perfume. But among these nighttime superstars, there's one that really steals the show: the moonflower. These vining plants climb and sprawl while their large white trumpet-shaped flowers unfold under the soft glow of the moon. Apart from being truly beautiful, they fill the night air with a gentle lemon scent, which makes it easy to see when the moonflower is considered the most beautiful of the bunch. Also, Singapore has a night zoo, so that's cool. You can see animals you normally wouldn't see. So if you're in Singapore, check out the night zoo. I've been there. It's beautiful. But you know what else is unusual? The fact that you haven't liked, shared, subscribed, or commented yet. It really helps the channel so we can keep bringing you these amazing videos. Also, don't forget to check out our socials. In 2018, scientists monitoring coral reefs near Hawaii's Kolokohonokauhau National Historical Park discovered a piece of floating plastic with 2 tiny octopus stowaways. One of the babies was pure charm, pea-sized, freckle arms with big expressive eyes. Its photo, posed near a researcher's fingertip, quickly went viral for being impossibly cute. The second baby? Not so much. This one was caught red-handed, or tentacled, throttling a tiny crab to death. I kid you not. Cute and cutthroat, these cephalopod hitchhikers were later released into a protected area where hopefully the crab population didn't suffer too much. The wreckage of war is beyond comprehension, but if you want to get some ideas, head up to Omaha Beach in Normandy on the far northern coast of France. Dig around in the sand a bit and chances are you touch some artifacts of World War II. That's because up to 4% of this beach is made up of shrapnel from D-Day, when hundreds of thousands of Allied troops landed to liberate Western Europe. Researchers have found iron, glass, and quartz crystals, all created by ammunition being fired, and it could be there for hundreds of thousands of more years. But you know what else is jaw-dropping? The fact that you haven't liked, shared, commented, or subscribed yet? It really helps the channel so we can keep bringing you this amazing content. Also, don't forget to check out our socials. Who owns rainwater? That's a question that never even occurred to me until I made this video. Turns out the state can claim ownership of the stuff that falls from the heavens. Gary Harrington from South Oregon found out this unbelievable information the hard way. He got into hot water for collecting the rain in reservoirs, which sounds harmless enough, but not in the eyes of the law. Justice rained down hard in 2012 when he was fined $1,500 and went to jail for 30 days. If you haven't heard of the plant Silphium before, well, there's a good reason for that. 2, actually. 1, they don't really mention it in school. And 2, it was made extinct in ancient Roman times. Silphium was super popular back then, thanks to its resin. You could use it to treat a sore throat, and it could also be used as both a perfume and a contraceptive. I'm not sure how that would work, and I'm not sure I want to know. Between the 1st and 3rd century CE, this yellow flower was picked to death, meaning Silphium was lost forever. Do you believe in the Virgin Mary giving birth to Jesus? Well, for any doubters out there, wait until you hear about this crocodile from Costa Rica. It may not be creating a new religion of tiny crocodile believers, but it's pretty strange to say the least. The crocodile has been kept at the Parque Reptilandia Zoo in isolation for more than 16 years. But in 2018, she gave birth to eggs with tiny hatchlings inside. Was this a miracle? Not exactly. But it does mean that crocodiles are capable of something called parthenogenesis, meaning they don't need a mate to fertilize their eggs. Up until now, crocodiles weren't known to have this ability. Now, females have definitely proved their independence. Just like human babies, little elephant calves come into the world with a powerful sucking reflex. This helps them find their mom's milk right away. But what happens when they're not hungry? Well, baby elephants, again, just like human babies with pacifiers, will often suck on their trunks for comfort. It's a soothing, self-calming technique that these little guys have mastered. It's also thought to help them learn how to control their trunks, which are incredibly complex and crucial for everything they do, from eating to grabbing mud for a dust bath. Now, don't try this at home, kids. Shaolin monk Feng Fei took martial arts to a new level by throwing a needle through a pane of glass without shattering it. The needle had so much force, it popped a balloon on the other side. In slow motion, you can see what's happening. Sometimes the needle pierces straight through, while other times it cracks the glass and small shards fly out to burst the balloon. Here's the science behind it. Glass is surprisingly strong when pressure is spread out, but it becomes fragile once it starts to crack. The needle, being rigid and sharp, focuses all its force on one tiny spot. If thrown hard enough, it cracks the glass, and from there, it takes, very little extra force to push it through. In the age of emails, Facebook, and WhatsApp, sending a letter can feel ancient, and it's a pretty old form of communication. To get an idea of just how old, consider this. The Mongols, under the command of Genghis Khan, and yes, I am pronouncing it that way, he was Mongolian, so he would not have called himself Genghis Khan. His name would have been Chinggis Khan. That's how it's pronounced in Mongolian. Anyway, I digress. Almost created the vast postal network known as the Yam system, which had over 10,000 buildings. That was almost 900 years ago. Why do I get the feeling that the Yam system might have been more reliable than UPS? Sonny Graham from Georgia took his own life by gunshot in 2008. A tragedy for sure, but particularly shocking when you know his history. You see, Graham had undergone a heart transplant where he received the heart of Terry Cottle. This man had also taken his own life. What's more, he'd done it in the same way, with a gun. Adding to the shock is the fact that Graham also married Cottle's partner. Dogs can be highly aggressive in certain situations. Did you know they were even used in wartime to fight tanks? The Red Army went through a phase of deploying exploding canines. Put simply, they attached a bomb to a poor dog and got it to run under a tank before detonating it. Thankfully, this cruel idea was short-lived. The Russians weren't the only country using animals as living bombs in history, but this was definitely one of the most shocking cases. Now, I bet that's not a sentence you ever thought you'd hear, but it's true. Back in 2013, a dedicated group of Chinese scientists turned number one into one of the most important tools of the body, teeth. The key to it was in stem cells, which are one of the most effective ways of repairing neurons, cartilage, tissue, organs, or virtually anything in the body. The Chinese team working to create a tooth took cells from human urine, for some reason, and transformed them into these super powerful stem cells. Then, these stem cells were tinkered with to grow all the most important parts of a tooth, like dentin, pulp, and enamel. Now, I don't know about you, but I already don't like the idea of going to the dentist. If they're going to be working with urine in the future, well, count me out. I don't mind the dentist. You guys make me sound so bad. Rude. Kids, it's okay. Go to the dentist. There's nothing to be afraid of. They know what they're doing. Do you remember the show I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant? It aired on Discovery Fit and Health and TLC around 2009 and featured stories of women who went through surprising pregnancies. It might sound unbelievable, but cryptic pregnancies, where women miss the signs until much later, are more common than you'd think. And the question everyone asks is, how? Well, there are a few reasons. Light bleeding can be mistaken for periods, even later in pregnancy. Some women have lower hormone levels, leading to less nausea. A smaller baby bump might be easy to overlook. Even fatigue can be written off as everyday stress. According to BBC Science Focus, a staggering 1 in 500 pregnancies go unnoticed until at least halfway through, and a mind-blowing 1 in 2,500 women don't realize they're pregnant until they're giving birth. A full moon on Leap Day, February 29th, is an incredibly rare event. Leap day only happens every 4 years to keep our calendar aligned with Earth's orbit, and syncing it with the lunar cycle is no small feat. In fact, this special event has only occurred a handful of times in history: 1504, 1600, 1752, 1820, and most recently, 1972. If you're too lazy to do the math, that's about twice every 236 years. Looking ahead, the next leap day full moon will shine in 2048, with the following ones in 2124 and 2268. Well, I'll hopefully be around for one of those. All three if I try hard enough. If this doesn't prove politicians only make decisions from themselves, I don't know what will. In the infamous Salem witch trials, a wave of panic was kicked off by a group of girls in Salem Village, Massachusetts, who claimed that women were practicing witchcraft. Before long, trials were being held and women were being punished. Over more than a year, 25 people were executed and more than 100 thrown in jail. What was it that finally put an end to the hysteria? The governor, William Phips, stepped in, but only after his wife, Lady Mary Phips, was accused of being a witch. Industrial action is older than you think. The days of striking and withholding your labor go all the way back to ancient Egypt. There's a record of workers downing tools under Pharaoh Ramses III, who ruled Egypt between 1187 and 57 BCE. The story goes that the pharaoh wouldn't get his tomb unless the workforce felt that they were being properly looked after. This must have been a gutsy move back in a time of slavery and brutal punishments. King Gojian ruled over the ancient Chinese state of Yu between 496 to 465 BCE. Taking him on in battle was a fearsome prospect. He used a gruesome and shocking war tactic, where those convicted of crimes played a key role. Not only did he put criminals front and center on the battlefield, he gave them specific instructions to follow if things went badly. A convict who had been beaten or captured had to cut off their own head to intimidate Gojian's enemies. There are some parasites that have been floating around for thousands of years and continue to affect us today. One of those is Giardia, which causes an infection with cramps and nausea and can cause long-term intestinal damage. Fun. During an excavation in Jerusalem of ancient toilets, scientists found this Giardia parasite, proving that it had been sending people running to the bathroom for thousands of years. Can you imagine going 45 days without a bowel movement? That's exactly what happened to a 20-year-old woman in India in 2013. Doctors were shocked to find a football-sized blockage in her rectum that could only be removed with surgery. While the cause of this extreme constipation remains a mystery, other cases have been linked to spinal cord damage or rare medical conditions that affect the nerves controlling the gut. These types of conditions can make it impossible to have a normal bowel movement and usually leave people relying on enemas or laxatives. Books have always been a favorite target of tyrants, and the Russian czars were no exception. In the late 19th century, after taking control of Lithuania, they tried to erase the country's culture by banning all Lithuanian writings. But they didn't count on the determination of Lithuanian communities abroad. From Prussia and the US, Lithuanians printed over 3 million books and papers in their language and smuggled them into Lithuania, often hidden in hay, furniture, or even coffins. Smugglers swam across rivers, carried 80-pound loads, and risked torture or exile to Siberia. But it paid off. Their bravery ended up saving Lithuanian, the oldest surviving Indo-European language. In a time when it feels like a struggle for veterans to get benefits, you might be surprised to learn that the government only just stopped paying pensions a few years ago for the Civil War. Now, anyone serving in the Civil War has long since died, but their children hadn't until 2020, when the last remaining child of a Union soldier named Irene Triplett passed away. Her father, Moses Triplett, had actually switched sides from the Confederacy, in part so that he would be rewarded with a pension. That turned out to be a very good move. He probably didn't imagine it would keep paying out for another 155 years, though. What a great investment. How far would you go to look beautiful? Would you put something on your skin that's made from dead people? Back in 2005, a Chinese company was revealed to be using human remains to make collagen. The story caused shockwaves around the world, but the company was surprisingly relaxed about the whole deal. Maybe because the bodies being used belonged to executed criminals, it was considered okay? Still, it doesn't sound like a good marketing strategy to me. What says I love you better than wearing the pubic hair of your beloved as jewelry? Yes, welcome to the wild world of Victorian fashion, which saw people's short and curlies used as a bold statement on personal relationships, just like regular jewelry with a hairy twist. Brain surgery is probably something you imagine with clean, sterile equipment, high-tech cameras, and super precise tools. But it wasn't always this way. And if there's one thing that's true about humans, it's that there's almost nothing we won't try. Around 1500 BCE, people were already experimenting with brain surgery. The evidence? A skeleton dating back to this time found in northern Israel with a distinct hole in the side of the skull. This was determined to be drilled with a man-made tool, and the operation was something called a trepanation that was common among a variety of ancient civilizations. It's not clear exactly what they were trying to achieve or what symptoms these people suffered from, but one thing's for sure, it would have hurt like hell. I mean, if fish can do it, why can't we? A new study has revealed that neon tetrafish actually form orderly queues when they have to escape through tight spaces. Their surprising behavior helps them to avoid collisions and keeps the evacuation running smoothly. The researchers hope to use these fishy insights to develop smoother traffic flow for both human drivers and self-driving cars. Zipper. It's a zipper. When you're merging, zipper, people. Just one. Just keep the traffic flow going. God. Good. No, speaking of Russians, the last Tsar, Nicholas II, wasn't exactly an imposing figure. Standing at just 5'6" or 1.67 meters, he was smaller than most of his Romanov ancestors. But what he lacked in stature, he made up for in bold choices, like getting a massive tattoo. In 1890, while visiting Japan, Nicholas decided to have a dragon tattoo inked onto his right forearm. The design took 7 grueling hours to complete, from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m., and was likely meant to symbolize power and strength. If this was truly an accident, then it's one of the most biggest ecological mistakes ever. During World War II, the US was using the Micronesian island of Guam as an important military base, but in the process of shipping equipment through Papua New Guinea, an unexpected traveler came along for the ride: the brown tree snake. Not only is this a dangerous and venomous snake to humans, but it's catastrophic for many other species too. It didn't take long for the brown tree snake to become the apex predator on the island and wipe out most other species. Even today, its population is more than 2 million, and they wreak havoc on infrastructure and military equipment while biting thousands of people. The Nishiyama Onsen Kyokan Hotel west of Tokyo has been in business since 705 CE. That makes it the oldest hotel in the world. But there's another shock to come. The hotel has been run by the same family this entire time. From showing people where to tie up their horses to handing out the password to the Wi-Fi, this place has seen it all. Princess Olga ruled Kiev from the years 945 to 957. There were attempts to marry her to Drevlian Beefcake, Prince Mal, but this didn't go well. Not only did she say no, she said no with extreme prejudice. Matchmakers who arrived at her door asking her to tie the knot were thrown into a grave and buried alive. You can't really blame her for being angry. After all, Prince Mal had murdered her previous husband, brutally ripping him in half, according to legend. After a global pandemic, it's understandable that everyone's a little on edge about foreign bacterial infections. In the UK, when a 48-year-old man rocked up to a hospital one day after getting bit by a stray cat, doctors were initially worried about tetanus or rabies. But it was soon clear that the symptoms were something completely different. His skin became puffy, red, and incredibly inflamed. Surgeons were forced to cut out part of his body's tissue, but the bigger question was, what the hell was this kind of infection? The closest doctors got to identifying it was classifying it to the Glabicatella family, but the search continues for what this new, aggressive kind of infection was, and how dangerous it might be. I have a stray cat story if you want to hear it. Let me know, maybe I'll tell it next time I mention cats. Have you ever wondered what's the most out-of-this-world sport? No, it's not pro wrestling. In fact, look no further than golf. In 1971, during the Apollo 14 mission, astronaut Alan Shepard became the first, and so far only, person to play a game on the moon. Using a makeshift club, Shepard took a mighty swing and whiffed. But his second attempt connected, sending the ball flying for what he described as miles and miles. My picture-perfect golf swing there. I'm gonna want to hit the equipment. Cannabis is becoming a surprising ally in zoo animal care, treating everything from pain and inflammation to anxiety and stress. Veterinarians have used CBD and THC on species ranging from elephants and lions to ferrets and parrots. That rhymes. One notable case was for that of Nydia, an Asian elephant in a Mexican wildlife park who struggled with chronic foot pain and poor appetite. until CBD came into the picture. The first sign it was working? A serious case of the munchies. Within days, she went from barely eating a third of her food to finishing it all. The use of cannabis still faces legal and research hurdles, but if you ask me, happier, hungry animals sounds like a win. Hungry, hungry hippos. Most of us know about Adolf Hitler's famously snubbing of African-American runner Jesse Owens at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. That was a huge hit to the idea of white supremacy pushed by the Nazis, who didn't even want black athletes to be eligible to compete. But you might not know that the four-time gold medalist didn't get much of a reception when he returned home to the US either. Unlike most other successful athletes, Owens didn't receive a message, gesture, or an invite to the White House by President Roosevelt. In case there was any doubt over how Jesse felt, he once said, "Hitler didn't snub me, it was our president who snubbed me." That's the name of a fish that people have a hard time getting a hold of. Its technical name is Halichoerus bivitatus, though it translates as the same thing. Its discovery dates back to 1791, though it's unclear whether the innuendo was intentional. Either way, it took a determined fisherman to catch that dick. Incredibly, this is how certain people in Iceland describe World War II. It sounds shocking because many who took part in the conflict felt far from blessed. However, in spite of all the bloodshed, there were positive effects from the war. Neutral Zone Iceland was occupied by British, Canadian, and American forces during the early 40s. Their presence gave a boost to the Icelandic economy and infrastructure, which changed the game for people there at a turbulent time in history. What's the most famous political assassination of all time? Abraham Lincoln? JFK? Well, historically, the answer is probably Julius Caesar, whose death was immortalized by English author William Shakespeare. Caesar, who had recently been elevated to the dictator of Rome in 44 BCE, was taken by surprise and killed by a group of Roman senators who opposed him. This all happened in a place called Largo Argentino in Rome, a place which has only been recently opened to the public to enjoy. Now, since I'm on the subject of sports, have you ever wondered how long a tennis match could possibly last? Believe it or not, the record breaker is an epic marathon that stretched for a mind-blowing 11 hours, 5 minutes. The legendary showdown between John Isner and Nicolas Mahut happened way back in 2010 at Wimbledon. And get this, it was just the first round. Imagine the stamina needed. The back-and-forth battle lasted over 3 days, with Isner eventually emerging victorious. In 2021, scientists crushed our dreams of immortality by declaring that human lifespans have a hard limit: 150 years. Sure, it's a huge jump from the US average of 74 for men and 80 for women, but it's still nowhere near forever. Researchers analyzed medical data from over 500,000 people to pinpoint the age when the body can no longer repair itself from everyday stresses like injuries or illnesses, and concluded that between 120 and 150, the body hits a breaking point where it simply can't recover. While therapies to keep the body resilient could theoretically push us beyond this limit, developing treatments that extend life while maintaining quality of life is just not feasible right now. And there go my plans to see the other two full moons on leap years. Dang it. What's the most valuable piece of artwork in the world? You might think it's the Mona Lisa, but if you price art by how many people fought over it, the answer is clearly the Ghent altarpiece. Completed in 1432 by two Flemish brothers, Hubert and Jan van Eyck, the gigantic oil painting measures 17 by 12 feet. It's made up of 12 double-sided panels and was renowned for its religious imagery and realism, and as a symbol of the beginning of the Renaissance. Given its importance, almost every historical figure has fought for it. From Napoleon to Adolf Hitler, it's been stolen more times than any other piece of art. One of the panels disappeared in 1934, a ransom of 1 million Belgian francs was demanded, and a series of clues were left. To this day, the mystery remains unsolved, and the panel is still missing. He may have been a brutal dictator, but it turns out Saddam Hussein had a sensitive side. Who knew? This was shown in a romance novel called Zabiba and the King. He released it in 2000, 3 years before being overthrown. How was it received? Well, reviews of the book were decent, though I'm not sure about putting the man himself on the cover, as has happened with some versions. I mean, would that get you in the mood? The University of Edinburgh's Parapsychology Unit has been offering students direct experiences of investigating the spooky and unexplained since the mid-80s. It's probably going too far saying they run ghost hunting courses, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, this is the place you want to go. That said, you better be prepared to do the work. This isn't some gimmick. The unit is a scientific institution like any other. Are there any better known mad geniuses than Ludwig van Beethoven? He was considered ugly and half crazy, which might have been explained by his terribly poor health. To start with, he became deaf in his 20s. Not exactly great for a guy pursuing a career in music. Researchers have now analyzed Beethoven's DNA using pieces of his hair and found out just how sick he was. And not the 90s kind of sick. They found that he had hepatitis in the final stages of his life and a severely damaged liver. Beethoven also suffered from mental poisoning, lupus, and a handful of other illnesses. Somehow, through all the pain and torment, he was able to compose some of the most beautiful classical music ever made. What would you say if I told you the Earth was hit by a meteor that was 10 times more powerful than an atomic bomb, and no one noticed? On December 18, 2018, a school bus-sized meteor exploded over the Bering Sea, a remote stretch of ocean between Russia and Alaska. And yet, despite its power, the impact went unheard by most, thanks to its isolated location. Luckily, military satellites spotted the blast, and infrasound detectors picked up on the low-frequency rumble, which helped scientists to unravel the mystery. If you thought your sibling rivalry was bad, it's got nothing on Adolf and Rudolf Dassler. Their feud didn't just split the family, it created two warring sportswear giants, Adidas and Puma. The rivalry began during World War II when Rudolf accused Adolf of drafting him into the military to take control of their shared company. Things only got worse after the war, with each brother trying to smear the other's Nazi affiliations. By 1948, the split was official. Adolf created Adidas, and Rudolf started Puma. The animosity ran so deep that when Rudolf was on his deathbed in 1974, he asked to see Adolf. And Adolf refused. Now this is a world record that'll get you in the history books, but for all the wrong reasons. In 1908, Luís Filipe was destined to inherit the title of King of Portugal from his father Carlos. But at 20 years old, he couldn't have imagined it would come quite so quickly, and leave even quicker. The royal family was returning to Lisbon from a trip to Alentejo in southern Portugal when two gunmen fired on the family. The assassins were killed at the scene, however not before they had landed several gunshots. King Carlos was killed almost immediately, while Luís Filipe survived for 20 minutes. At that time, Luís was technically King of Portugal for a total of 20 minutes, making him the shortest reigning monarch in history. And it's safe to say that he really didn't have time to enjoy it. I'm being flippant, but the Halden prison in Norway is known for being more luxurious than most. The progressive and high security location has a welcoming attitude to prisoners. If you're lucky enough to be locked up there, you have your own shower and a flat screen TV in your cell. Reports also mention how fluffy the towels are. I guess that makes towel whippings more difficult. Seriously though, this is seen as an organized and effective approach toward helping people back into society. Have you ever forgotten a new person's name even though you've just been introduced to them? Don't worry, you're experiencing what's known as the next in line effect. Explored initially by scientist Malcolm Brenner in the 70s, it's part of something called inattentional blindness. Basically, you're distracted by your own feelings. You want to make a good impression when meeting new people, so you zone out a little thinking about yourself. Then you forget about the person you're supposed to be focusing on. Are you the kind of person who craves silence? Or maybe you prefer to be in the middle of a loud party? Well, according to new science, your brain might not really be able to tell the difference. Experiments have found that we tend to believe continuous sounds are longer than two separate sounds, even if the two sounds add up to the same length. According to the study's authors, what this means is that the brain treats silence in the same way as sounds. Maybe that's why some people find environments that are too silent unnerving. It's the same as being too noisy. I know it doesn't sound all that appealing, but onions are surprisingly rich in L-tryptophan, an amino acid that converts to melatonin, a hormone that can help you regulate your sleep. Plus, onions can help reduce stress levels, another barrier to slumber. So, while the thought might make your eyes water, onions could be the key to unlocking wonderfully restful nights. Despite its name, New Orleans French Quarter is more Spanish than French. When the French established the area in 1717, they built it in their native style. But after France ceded Louisiana to Spain in 1763, everything changed. Two devastating fires in 1788 and 1794 destroyed nearly all of the original French architecture, which relied on flammable materials like straw and hay. When it came time to rebuild, the Spanish used their own architectural style, prioritizing materials and designs that were, less prone to fire. As a result, most of the French Quarter's iconic look owes its charm to Spanish ingenuity. I mentioned D-Day earlier, but what does it actually stand for? You might have never thought about it before. One version is that it stands for Departed Day, which makes total sense. However, others have argued against that because soldiers were deliberately sent out on different days. Some ideas for the real meaning have been Decision Day, Doomsday, or Death Day. But according to military experts, it probably had a much more mundane explanation. When a mission is planned without a specific date, the D in D-Day simply refers to the day it begins. So that would make the famous D-Day Day-Day? Doesn't sound quite as exciting now, does it? He was released from jail in 1990, however, South African president and icon Nelson Mandela was viewed with suspicion by the United States. Shockingly, he remained on their terror watch list years later. Because he was connected to the African National Congress, which the US regarded as terrorists, it took a while for authorities to trust Mandela despite his glowing reputation. They finally took him off the list in 2008. What happens to the national anthem when a country splits in half? Czechoslovakia became Slovakia and the Czech Republic in 1993. This resulted in a musical dilemma. They couldn't both use the same anthem as they were now in different places. How are things resolved? The title of the former Czechoslovakia's anthem sums the situation up. Where is my home? As it turned out, Where is my home went to the Czech Republic. Meanwhile, Slovakia had a classic track titled Lightning over the Tatry, which became their new national anthem. By the way, the Tatry are a mountain range. With climate change and sustainability an important issue for everyone, the construction industry is always looking for new, greener material to use. Now, they've found one in an unlikely source. But it's not pretty. It's used diapers. And I'm not sure who first had this idea, but a research team found that recycled diapers contain cotton, plastic, and wood pulp, which can all be used for making a concrete mix. It was then used in a one-story house, making it more than a quarter of the materials used. Luckily, the diapers are cleaned and sterilized first, so it's not going to leave a stench in your new home. And considering that over 18 billion diapers are thrown out each year, that's exactly the kind of out-of-the-box thinking it'll take to save the environment. Here's a surprising fact for you. Nicotine, the addictive ingredient that can be found in cigarettes, is actually incredibly toxic to insects. It acts like a super fast bug killer and can take down the insects exposed to it in less than an hour. That's why some people trust in tobacco-based insecticides. Although it's important to note that these can be risky and there are safer alternatives. We've all heard of strange things falling from the sky, like fish in Honduras or birds in Mexico, and let's just leave spiders out of the equation. But in 2007, the small town of Jennings, Louisiana experienced something truly bizarre. As locals went about their day, clumps of worms started falling from the sky. Yeah, it rained worms. The likely culprit was a waterspout ripping through the nearby Lacassine Bayou. Officials believed it sucked up worms from the muddy ground, carried them miles through the air, and, well, dropped them on Jennings. Take that, Jennings. Dear Lacassine. No, sincerely Lacassine. I screwed up that joke. Whatever. Just move on. I tried. Kim Jong-il, the infamous military dictator of North Korea. A man who truly left his mark by shoring up the military, overseeing famines, trying to kickstart the economy, and writing operas? That's right, apparently the supreme leader wrote 6 operas, along with 1,500 books, almost none of which have been released to the public. However, one has made it through the cracks, a book entitled On the Art of Opera. The book puts forward a case for a new kind of Korean revolutionary opera that speaks to the masses and excites them to participate in nationalistic action. For him, opera was too elitist and difficult to understand. Is it possible to make the mighty Mississippi River run backwards? Certainly, if the country is hit by an earthquake. Back in 1812, states such as Missouri and Kentucky experienced powerful seismic activity in an area called the New Madrid Fault Zone. This zone runs for 150 miles, and the quake triggered a fluvial tsunami, where the tide of the Mississippi was well and truly turned. I guess at that point in time, it was called the Ippisisson River. We've all done it. Searched online for symptoms and possible causes when we feel poorly. And it's always so frustrating. You could have the sniffles, or you could be about to die from cancer. It's never a good idea, and there's actually a word to describe people who use Dr. Internet. Cyberchondriac mixes cyber with hypochondria, where you immediately think of the worst outcome. If you listen closely, you'll hear music everywhere. And for one creative scientist working at Yellowstone National Park, the sounds of an earthquake appealed to her as a potential piece of music. She used a specialized program to convert seismic vibrations from underneath the surface into musical notes, which were then performed by a flute player. The end product is a piece of music that sounds jumpy and choppy and gives you a real sense of how it must feel to be underground. The Philippines is home to a giant carnivorous monster, the Nepenthes attenborough, named after Sir David Attenborough. These incredible traps, reaching up to a foot wide, lure in insects and small animals with their sweet, irresistible nectar. But the fun ends there. Its slippery edges and digestive juices guarantee a gruesome fate for any unfortunate victims. These monstrous plants aren't picky eaters, and their favorite meal is, you guessed it, rats. On July 4th, 1776, the US was home to just 2.5 million people. Today, that number has skyrocketed to over 334 million. And that figure is growing faster and faster. In just 61 years, from 1960 to 2021, the population grew by 83.7%, jumping from 180.67 million to 331.89 million. So, if all roads once led to Rome, I think it's safe to say they now lead to New York City. If you've ever entered a raffle, then you're probably used to the standard prizes. Tickets somewhere, a spa package, maybe a car if you're lucky. What you would never imagine is winning a raffle and going home with a baby. Not a doll or a toy, a real-life baby. That's what a Paris-based orphanage did back in 1911 with the so-called Loterie des Bébés. Abandoned children were a much bigger issue then, and orphanages were desperate. The raffle was a way to raise money for charities and to find homes for needy children. Imagine explaining to your kid that you won them in a competition. How embarrassing is it that the director of the CIA had his email account hacked by a group named Crackers with Attitude? Adding to the awkwardness was the fact that the culprit was a teenager. Director John Brennan's AOL address was taken over in 2015. How exactly did the rogue cracker pull it off? He reportedly pretended to be a phone technician in order to get Brennan's details before calling AOL and changing the password. What do you think would win in a fight between eau de cologne and bubonic plague? Unbelievably, some thought the perfume came out on top. Oh, and you didn't put it on your skin. You were supposed to drink it. The idea being that you turned yourself into a giant human-shaped perfume bottle to beat the infection. Among the worst crimes imaginable has to be cannibalism. It's hard to fathom having the urge to eat another person's flesh. But historically, it may have actually been the norm. In a cave used by our ancient ancestors in southwest England, the remains of half a dozen humans tell a graphic story. Their bones have cutting and teeth marks, proof that they were eaten by other humans. These remains are from over 14,000 years ago. But in other parts of the world, evidence of cannibalism goes back much further, to as long as 1.5 million years ago. I guess at some point, if you're desperate and hungry, meat is meat. Have you ever heard of a creature with a disappearing, exit strategy? Meet Nemiopsis ledii, the warty comb jelly, or as some call it, the sea walnut. Unlike its fellow comb jellies, Nemiopsis has a rather unique digestive system. Most animals have a mouth, a digestive tract, and an exit. Jellyfish even use the same opening for both food and waste, but the sea walnut operates differently. It seems to have a temporary anus that simply vanishes after it expels waste. Scientists believe this might be an evolutionary abnormality, placing the sea walnut somewhere between the animals with permanent anuses and those with just one opening. Here at List 25, we teach you everything. Like today's number one item. Have you ever heard of an SFD? Some names are so complex and convoluted they lose all meaning. And then there are the names that are as straightforward as they come. This is definitely one of those. An SFD is a technical drawing used to plan and improve sanitation and sewage systems, primarily in developing countries. Its main goal is to help planners prevent waste from contaminating drinking water and other waterways. That's because, well, let's be honest, no one wants that in their river. So, what does SFD stand for, you might be asking? Shit flow diagram. Yep, the vital tool in keeping waterways clean has a name that's as direct as its purpose. I guess poop just didn't cut it. Go back far enough and you'll find all the royal families in Europe are related somehow. But for some, it seemed they might be ruling over the wrong country. No one fits that description more than George I, who was the King of Great Britain and Ireland in the 18th century. The only problem was that he was actually German. He was born in Germany, raised in Germany, and spent most of his time in Germany. Then, at the age of 53, he was called to England to become king. And who could say no to that? Even then, he couldn't stay away from his homeland, traveling back so much that by the time of his death, he had spent 20% of his reign in Germany. Is that a case of an immigrant stealing jobs from locals? Cats famously have 9 lives, and Unsinkable Sam gave up 3 of them, surviving a trio of boating disasters. This feline hero of wartime was the ship's cat aboard the German Bismarck. After that went down, Sam switched sides to the Allies. He was then stationed aboard the HMS Cossack and finally the Ark Royal. Despite being in many hairy situations, Sam made it into old age and had a ball before passing away in 1955.